Okay, so we're going to go through this AI 2030 document for insurance companies, and let's. This is a free document, and I'll link to it. Um, so let's dive into what it's about. So chapter one, the manifesto, and chapter chapter two, executive summary, and chapter three. So we're just going to touch on the very first topics here to go through about the concepts and how kind of AI and agent agencies kind of fit into this, and some of the difference that we have now with the ability to use AI to make certain things more complicated or use more complicated tools without the overhead of human labor. So this is not written by me. This is written by Jason Kaz, and you can find him on LinkedIn. Um, and I'm not going to go through the manifesto. I'm just going to go through just this slide here. So here he talks about um, these five aspects: uh, replicating repetition with automation, route tasking, logic, no job titles, structuring itself for scale and not survival, empowering humans to focus where they matter most, and tracking real-time metrics. So this is very interesting just to start off with, and taking this from a more AI agentic approach. We can already see like replace repetition with automation. This has changed a lot. Like, what is automation? Before we had structured automation, and you would have seen that with workflow engines, in Salesforce, in HubSpot, in Comunda, and other type of N8N, and other Zapier flow engines. But now we're talking about structured and unstructured data. So this brings in the level of cognition. AI itself is not a magic bullet when it comes to cognition and decisions. Without the company methodology, without knowledge, without a stepwise approach, it's going to be very generic. It's not going to be very specific. You won't be able to use it to replicate automation. But with a more target approach, then you can. The next one here, routing by tasks. So I like to think about this is routing by knowledge, which also comes down to tasks. It's like, how do you want to use something like a RAG interface, how to use information in the right way. So, working with a variety of clients, we're focused on different ways of routing tasks. So, one aspect is using videos, using meetings, using recordings, using documents to create what it is to be the company. So this can be FAQs, methodologies, many different aspects. So an AI without data is nothing. So routing to tasks creates a more distinguished nature between knowledge and obviously a more targeted way of performing actions. So this is where we kind of get into knowledge. Structure itself for scale, not survival. This I really consider from the AI point of view as continual improvement. Continual improvement is super critical for the success of any agentic and AI flow. So continual improvement comes in different forms, but the forms we can think about is human in the loop. This is an expression which means when certain actions are not confident, then we need the human to add value, to explain an edge case, to explain a strategy, to explain a future movement. So to be able to scale, you do not want a static system. You want a system where your output is as valuable as getting the feedback. The feedback will correct. The other aspect we'll get into is like simulation and testing. So performing simulation allows research, allows new data to come in, allows AI to perform both sides of the equation, performing your as your automation, but also as your customer, allowing for you to scale for the future and scale for aspects of the unknown. Empowering humans with a focus where they matter. So this is very crucial. I think you need to think about this motion as thinking of the AI as almost like a junior employee, um, leading up to a senior employee, leaving the humans to really be where they need to be, building the relationships, being more strategic, being judgmental of the AI, like managing, even micromanaging the AI to a point where you're going to reach the results that you need to be, um, and tracking real metrics. So this is also, I think, is in the terms of AI, is extremely important too, because the metrics is the northern star for a computer, for an AI. Like, what is good? We have the question of ethical behavior. We have the question of financial goals. We have the question of contributing to society, um, customer satisfaction, all these metrics that you have. And here we're talking about AI new metrics, but we're talking about how does that reflect back into your system? Because if you have a continual improvement process, improvement needs to be defined, and it needs to be defined by metrics. If you give the AI freedom to do whatever it wants, it's probably going to find the simplest path, which is not always the right path. If you are trying to find the balance between customer satisfaction, improving GP, or other kind of metrics within the process, or time to market, then the the way your continual improvement will apply will be different again. So here they go into insurance definitions of each, but I'm putting the AI spin on here, and we'll go through each of these as this document goes on. To start, I want to talk about what is automation. So automation, we know of different engines. The engines that exist today is like N8N, um, Comunda, HubSpot, all these other workflow engines, and they do a good job. They're very generally quite linear. They have conditions, and they go through a process. So you'll see some kind of trigger, some condition. It will perform some type of actions according to the conditions, perform another action, and it'll go through the flow. So this is, I'm sure, very familiar with a lot of people in the sense of how workflows go. There's been a tendency for, especially agencies, to go to more simpler workflows, and it's a valid principle because it's easier to visualize, it's more user friendly, and a lot of benefits to it. Here, if I'm talking about workflows, I'm talking about a few other aspects as well. So if we move into a different type of mentality, we start thinking about workflows in a more complicated way. So here I'm basing a lot of BPMN, and here we have this concept of um, a trigger. We have, in this case, we have AI, which can use tools. So this is similar to like an N8N. Conditions, which obviously lead us to paths, uh, and then go through an execution. So here I'm introducing something that's more AI focused, and I'll explain why. So it goes beyond some of those limitations of N8N and and HubSpot and other kind of workflow engines, which is the concept of boundary events and event-driven concepts. So the the workflows themselves, um, we need to think about how they work in operation. So before we're dealing very linear, that when you start introducing softer concepts, we need different concepts such as when do we escalate a process? When do we hand off a process? What happens when events happen outside of a task which will rewind or flow forward. So just for the purpose of this, we're going to focus on heavily based on BPMN workflows, but visualized through the N8N style of workflows. So let's dive into that a little bit more, because we need to split out the workflows with what is AI. So here I got the two concepts of workflows in terms of how to do automation, but let's talk about the concepts of agents. So workflows were specific information. Um, Agents are a process of rationalizing information to be able to perform an action. So here the agents are split out, and this is only for discussion purposes, not actually configured correctly. But here we're thinking about agents as something in the workflow that can perform an action based on knowledge it has. That knowledge could be a data store, it could be tools, it could be a AI model, to perform an action. So, for an example, a customer complaint came in, or a customer request, or an insurance proposal came in. The agent would act with the actions that it has. Um, you want it to go through a process. You want to go through the concept of reviews. So, like a human, especially trying to think of a human like a junior employee or an employee making very important decisions, each action needs to be reviewed. And with the AI agentic formats, then we have the ability to do that. We have the ability to always be reviewing certain actions. These actions being reviewed, if it's good or if it's bad, is then we get into this idea of chaining agents together. So this could be either event driven or a sequential, where reviews and actions keep on feeding back, um, going back and forth. And we can say, like, the reviewer might have one set of criteria, the actions might be another. So think of this as like OpenAI talking to OpenAI, or it doesn't matter what model. And they're just checking each other to ensure that we end up with the result. And you can see that with thinking models with OpenAI trying to get the best results. But here we have the reviewer, which may have independent information against this other one. So this could be a series of actions, not a single action. Just depends on what we're trying to achieve. The reviewer will generally talk about guards. So guards is the when information is of important nature. So if you're doing proposals or you're responding, especially in the assurance space, you need to make sure that there's a comfort level of what's being responded. So a guard is if it's regulatory or there's something that the agent shouldn't be responding to, that an employee would have to escalate as well, or it's sensitive information, then that's when you need to place a guard. So you could have these in parallel or sequence, but the idea is an agent is a combination of all these things. With guards, you'd normally talk about escalation, which is in workflow when we're talking about boundaries and events. When things don't normally aren't going to follow the normal path, they're going to need an escalation path, a different process. And the agentic flow will give us the ability to do this. And we normally call this either a human in the loop. In this case, I'm calling it a human QA for that sense. Um, the agent then confirms a response, but also we're talking about reviews. So when we talk about agents, there has to be this concept of continual learning. Without continual learning, you're never going to get better. And I believe a lot of the projects fail in AI is because there is no feedback loop. There's no modeling, there's no quantified values, there's no human in the loop. So, depending on what you want to achieve, you need something to optimize against. So, here we talk about a review. Let's say we review, we create actions, which maybe respond to an email or maybe send a message or maybe create a quote or whatever it's going to be in our defined actions. But if we aren't able to create a satisfactory response, then this is the point where we need a human in the loop. And the concept is that it's going to be feeding back to the knowledge. So somehow we're going to be feeding back knowledge. We're going to be improving the knowledge. We're going to be improving the agentic workflow. So this could be in a textual format, in the format of FAQs. It could be in the format of um, tool adjustment. It could be um, a variety of aspects. But if we continual improvement should be both human and automated in that aspect. So our ultimate goal is that over time, any agentic flows that we're using will um, come back and grow and grow and grow. So this is defined independent because it has different aspects. It has builders, independent agents of the agents. So you think of it like a micro, like you're doing electronics or something. You're creating a subcomponent which has a component which has a component, all connected together. So the agents would represent things like reflective agents, which are designed for planning, or functional calling, or coding agents, which kind of specialize in that to be part of this orchestration and have access to different tools. And Vector, we normally call Vector is our knowledge store. So many use knowledge store, but Vector store gives us the ability to retrieve information in real time for an agent. So what it can access, what it can't. So in the document, in the insurance world, we talk about different aspects of the business in this document. And that's kind of where we talk about routing and how knowledge, not only the task, but how knowledge is routed as well to feed back into this continuous loop. So to summarize, where as we kind of go through this document, when we talk about automation, we're talking about here I'll talk about a bit more advanced automation. But the thought is that over time, automation becomes these kind of diagrams that you're seeing from, you'll see this from HubSpot or from uh, N8N or Comunda, is that the AI will be generating these diagrams, and these agents become one element within here. So this process, in case of information extraction, can become an agent, can become a email agent or a responsive agent, but essentially we'll have a trigger for that agent. It's going to perform certain actions, processes, thinking rationalized through LLMs or neural nets or other models and using tools, and it's going to create an output. And this output will then be passed on the chain to the next action. Um, and it's important that the AI is mixed in with the procedural as well because there's no benefit. Um, an example of that is in the use case, if I have a business customer in insurance or a consumer customer, or I'm trying to do property insurance or whatever it is, there's no point in trying to get a single agent to perform all those tasks. You're mixing knowledge, you lose the benefit of the continual improvement, although you could achieve your results, making it a smaller model, more targeted purpose based on product line, service lines, or, you know, distinguish, like anything that groups things together in the sense of knowledge is a better way. And the tools are tools, right? So you need to create a quote or you need a regulatory body or whatever it's going to be, there's no benefit in trying to get the AI to call a tool if you can call the tool and pass that information in. So knowledge can be shared functionally, and then it can be shared within the agentic workflow. So going through this document, this motivation of building this and why we're going through it is that it has to be built, and I do agree with that. As a company, so we need to be refining. Um, we need to be following these things: best practice reports, consulting, selling labor, um, agency owners still hiring for problems that routing could solve, and vendors publishing technology without an operational framework. So, you know, what we're doing is trying to cover these aspects of Jason's document here. Um, and you know, there's some things that are a little different, but next stage we'll go through the metrics and how we can use these metrics that he's establishing, both in the sense of seeing tracking your performance with the AI and agents, and also how those metrics can be fed back for the most critical part of agentics workflows, which is continual improvement and optimization. All right. So thanks for that, and I'll catch you in the next one.